All right, so hello and welcome back. So today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to be checking out how France fought a lightning war in Mali, Operation Serval. Okay, this is from Battle Order. Please go check out the original video. It'll be in the description, and please give that a like. The dude does a damn good work. So I will just be breaking down this video, so more people may be able to understand what the fuck is going on, because this is actually pretty highly complex. So I don't expect an average viewer to understand all the idiosyncrasies that are going to be happening in this video. So this one may turn into a long video so I can break down everything properly. So other than that, a big shout out to my patrons that make this stuff possible, and the link to my Patreon will be down there. Otherwise, let's get to it.
Al-Qaeda-linked Islamist rebels in Mali have promised to drag France into an Afghanistan-style war. They've launched a counter-offensive after 4 days of French airstrikes on their northern strongholds.
It's January 2013, and a war has returned to Mali. Conflict is nothing new to this West African country. In the aftermath of the 2012 Tuareg rebellion, Mali was split in two, with a dense, fertile south under the recently couped central government, and the arid, sparsely populated north under the control of three main rebel groups. One of these groups is the National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad, or the MNLA, which is a secular Tuareg organization that seeks the independence of the largely Arab-Berber North Mali from the sub-Saharan central government in the south. However, while Tuareg autonomy sparked the North's secession, the MNLA has been pushed to the periphery, as secession has been hijacked by Islamist extremist groups. The most prominent is Ansar Dine, which seeks not the North's independence, but the enforcement of Sharia law in all of Mali. Aligned with them is Mujao, centralized around the city of Gao. They draw support from Al-Qaeda, who tie Mali into the broader Islamist insurgency plaguing the Maghreb and Sahel regions of North Africa.
And this is still a problem even today. They haven't been rooted out yet. And as I said, Mali, basically the south is fertile, and the north, again, when you start going into the north, basically really nobody fucking lives out here. It's too arid, and you got the Sahara Desert out here. You can't really live out here. The population is all down here in Mali. Besides the guys that are trying to splinter off, there's not much population out here, so it does make sense that they want to break free. The secular part, the Islamists, no.
This was the state of Mali through late 2012. However, after the Malian government rejected Ansar Dine's most recent demand to integrate Sharia into its constitution, the conflict reignited. On January
Sharia law cannot be integrated into a constitution. Let's put it that way. Those two ideas do not work at all together.
January 7th, over 1,000 Islamist fighters mass in the vicinity of Bore, motorized by up to 300 pickup trucks. Islamists are closing in on the town of Kona, straddling the Niger River. They approach from Douenza to the east and Koriense to the north, while another element heads south to cut off the Malians' route of retreat back towards Sivari.
Now think about this. Islamists, we've always been taught, for some fucking reason, that they're not very educated, they don't know tactics, blah, 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 blah. Talk to any veteran. Islamists, and depends on where you're fighting, Al-Qaeda and terrorists, no, they got their shit together. So these guys, not only do they have their shit together, not only they're infantry, but they're also coordinating on a massive scale, and they are also motorized infantry. And they're going to conduct a flanking maneuver on Kona to cut the Malians off from their escape route.
Using their pickups supported by heavy weapons, the militants move fast and place themselves within Kona by 10 a.m. With incomplete information, indecisiveness from the central government, and a poor supply situation, the Malians withdraw from the city at 11 a.m. This puts the Malians in a dire situation. If left unabated, the capture of Mopti is assured, and if they take the river crossing in Mopti, Mali's capital is only a 2 days drive away.
And there's probably nothing stopping them from driving those 2 days again.
The Malians need help, and the French are the first to answer the call. When Kona was overran on January 10th, France had no forces in Mali. But as a former colonial power in the region, it remained persistently engaged throughout West Africa. When President
So there are many reasons that the French are still interested in this region. I'll back it up a little bit so you have a better geographic idea. So France, this used to be a French former colony. France has always been very interested in its colonies. Now, They have since withdrawn and don't have any colony holdings, but that doesn't mean they are not invested in their former colonies economically, politically, and militarily. Okay, that doesn't mean anything that they're not invested. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They are heavily invested. There are different videos you can guys go watch about how the finances of France, how like these countries are indebted to the French National Bank. Long story short, France has a very keen interest on this region that is not just, oh, we need to stop the terrorists, but that is probably priority number one.
On January 10th, France had no forces in Mali, but as a former colonial power in the region, it remained persistently engaged throughout West Africa. When President Francois Hollande announces France will intervene on the 11th, elements of the 4th Special Forces Helicopter Regiment equipped with cannon and missile-armed Gazelles are immediately rerouted from counterterrorism operations in the neighboring Burkina Faso. Within 2 hours of taking flight, 2 Gazelles engage Islamist convoys heading south from Kona. Strafing at low altitude, at least one militant pickup is destroyed. But with no support, the Gazelles take heavy fire, killing one helicopter's co-pilot and forcing the other one down near Sivary. It's not until a second flight of Gazelles arrives that the militant advance is halted and turned back to Kona. Strike jets deployed to the region.
So what this is basically just trying to buy time for the defense, so that France can get more units into Mali. Because again, this is a day later after Kona. The special forces that they have, or any region, these guys are technically special forces, more like just deployed units that they have in, as they said, Djibouti or Jabo in Burkina Faso out there. And all this attack is, and this is fucking brave shit to do, they're charging the motorized convoy and destroying anything that they possibly can with Gazelles. Gazelles are not exactly attack helicopters, I'll put it to you that way. They are very lightly armed choppers that can have some armament.
And turned back to Kona. Strike jets deployed to the region also become involved, targeting rebel positions. However, it's clear that air support alone will not accomplish France's main objective: help Mali take back its northern territories. The force that France brings to bear,
and that is important. Air support will not do that. It will help stabilize kind of the front, but it will not help guys push. We learned that over many years in Afghanistan, let's put it that way.
Will be shaped by the situation. The French will ultimately be limited by their air and sea lift capacity and lean on its allies for heavier air transport. The force needs to deploy quickly and...
So as he said, from Jan to September 2013, 30% of air movement in Mali was done by Allied aircraft, which means France does not have a extraordinarily ability to see and airlift forces very rapidly anywhere. The United States is probably one of the countries that does, with our C-17s that can really... we can fit an Abrams in a C-17, let's put it that way. But we also still don't have that many of them. Again, so not a fault of France. It's just they just don't have the logistics to be able to do this on a sudden and urgent scale.
Transport. The force needs to deploy quickly and on short notice to meet the present threat, be flexible enough to operate in a highly dispersed environment, and fit the overall concept of operations, which calls for units conducting fast-paced, independent maneuvers with limited sustainment support. As per French doctrine, these can...
So, again, why he's saying operationally and strategic here, there are 3 different kinds of theater, 3 different kinds of general concepts you can think of. Strategic is like what the hell is going on for this entire war. Okay. Operationally is what is happening in this region and what is our plan to do. Tactically is the actual battles that will be happening and what is tactically feasible. Okay. So those are the 3 things: strategic, operational, and then tactical.
With limited sustainment support.
And again, these are all the elements that you need to think about. Just for strategic, we need somebody that can arrive quickly, and our airlift and sea lift capabilities are limited. Operationally, we need a unit that can move flexibly, that is flexible, is mobile, is independent, can take care of itself, and run on limited sustainment, which basically means limited supply.
As per French doctrine, these conditions call for a lean, highly mobile combined arms task force that can be committed in theater almost immediately. These forces will be drawn from many different units based on who is closest and ready to go. The formation,
which basically means special forces or light infantry or airborne units. Those are going to be your fastest guys and quickest guys that can possibly be deployed. Maybe the French also have some light units that are being shown here with the ERCs. So
That France will use to meet this challenge is the Joint Tactical Group, or Groupement Tactique Interarmes. Roughly equivalent to a British battle group or Russian battalion tactical group, French tactical groups are highly modular. Although France does have permanent regiments, brigades, divisions, and so on, since the 1990s, these echelons have mainly existed to generate tactical groups for overseas deployments.
So again, this X means like very big division is 2, a corps is 3. So this is the smallest brigades, like the smallest units that you would use operationally in a war setting. Regiments, again, with a 3, and then battalions with this little accent mark. So this is a battalion that's maybe over strength. So regiments not really used independently. But again, as you said, we have moved from the ability to deploy divisions and brigades to places, which is what we did in World War II. Into the Cold War, we still kept that system, but we went down to brigades. And now, in the modern day, again, we don't have the money. The manpower to do any of that. So we have to start breaking it down into smaller units, battalion size, or maybe overstrength battalions.
Tactical groups deployed to the country would be generated from multiple brigades, and once in Mali itself would come under the ad hoc Serval Brigade.
So again, as I said, 3rd Mechanized Brigade, 6th Light Armored Brigade, 9th Light Armored Marine Brigade, and 11th Airborne Brigade. They're all going to take subunits out of them to form them into a brigade, which would basically be a Kampfgruppen, if you're familiar with that term. So it becomes a several brigade, which basically is an ad hoc formation of many units, and they're supposed to work together. How effective this is, it depends. Highly elite units, you're still going to have problems because you haven't coordinated before. Lesser units that never do joint tactical operations, again, it's going to be somewhat painful. It is doable though. So, and again, NATO countries usually do interoperations, and we also do train to a very high standard. So this isn't impossible to do, and it is effective.
On paper, tactical groups are meant to consist of a command element, usually a regimental command and logistics company, 3 infantry and 1 armor company or vice versa, and support elements as needed, often including engineers and fire elements. These assets then make...
Okay, so what he's talking about here, again, the reason breaking this down is it's a bit complex for people that don't understand this. So, the Joint Tactical Group is your basic unit that will be deployed and will be operational in this theater. Now, the Command and Logistics Company, a company is usually 120 people, more or less, depends on the country, depends on the time frame, depends on what the fuck they're doing. So, 3 infantry companies is standard. 3 infantry of 3. So, usually when you're making down a unit like this, it's always 3 of something will be your main assets, and then everything else will be supporting. So, there will be command structure. So, that's what this is. It's basically, this is the command. If you ever look at an Orbat, this will be command, drop, and then these will be the main units that are attached. And then, again, it'll probably talk about engineers and stuff. But, yes, there will be a tank company attached to this.
Often including engineers and fire elements.
And then an engineer company from an engineer regiment. Again, these are all units that are being cobbled together from different regiments, which are around 3,000 people, 3,000 to 1,000, depends on the country.
These assets then make up reinforced companies called subgroups or SGTIAs, which are the basic building block of French task forces. They essentially look the same as the tactical groups, but at a company scale based on maneuver platoons.
So basically, this is going to be an overstrength company. So a platoon, 48 people, can be 36, can be really whatever fucking number you want. So again, it's just a smaller version of what we talked about. They have a command, they have a tank platoon, they have an engineer platoon, and then infantry platoons. So the companies, usually around 48 people in a platoon. That's a bit high, but it can be 42 and down to 36. Europeans usually do 36. But again, this is just a smaller version of the Joint Tactical Group. Instead of companies, they're down to platoon.
Confusion when we refer to specific SGTI.
So I'll back this up a bit so we understand.
Basic building block of French task forces. They essentially look the same as the tactical groups, but at a company scale based on maneuver platoons.
Also, those little 3 dots mean, if I remember my NATO symbiology right, that means motorized.
To reduce confusion when we refer to...
Actually, that means platoon. I'm sorry. I'll talk about it in a minute if we ever bring this up again, but NATO symbology, all you really need to know for this little section is infantry is the X, and then it means armored infantry if you have this little tank thing. And then this is the tank, and this is engineers, and then this is command. Same thing up here. It doesn't change. All it does is just get bigger with the symbols up top.
Based on maneuver platoons. To reduce confusion, when we refer to specific SGTIAs, we'll be using the American terminology company team to describe them. France's.
So remember, company teams are going to be able to use to describe basically the company size elements that they are using for this.
First conventional unit is airlifted into the Malian capital within 24 hours. Just coming off of a 4-month deployment to Chad, this force will later fall under Tactical Group 1 as Company Team 1-1.
Remember, this is a company-sized element that has been out there for 4 months, and they were airlifted in 1 day to Mali.
Consists of an armored infantry company mounted in VAB APCs and the reconnaissance and support company from the 21st Marine Infantry Regiment, or REMA, reinforced by an ERC-90 armored car platoon from the 1st Foreign Cavalry Regiment, French Foreign Legion.
So, let's break this down. There's 2 companies here. Again, weapons platoon, so usually there's always a weapons company in... So I have a support company. Usually there's always a weapons company, and there's always usually a weapons platoon in a infantry battalion. So this is not a battalion, this is a company team. It gets very confusing quickly. Anyway, so they have REMA. So REMA basically means more or less Marines, as he said. First platoon, Recce. So Rec means recon. So these are recon. And as he said, they have RAMA, so 120. They have French Foreign Legion guys in here. So.
Infantry Regiment, or REMA, reinforced by an ERC-90 armored car platoon from the 1st Foreign Cavalry Regiment, French Foreign Legion.
So the ERC, which is basically these armored cars, are from the French Foreign Legion, which makes sense. French Foreign Legion fighting out in Africa.
By 8 a.m. the next day, Company Team 1-2, consisting of an ERC-90 squadron from the 1st Parachute Hussar Regiment and hastily reinforced by an infantry platoon from the 3rd Marine Infantry Parachute Regiment flown in from Gabon, set off on a road march from Côte d'Ivoire. They're accompanied by a combat engineer platoon from the 7th Parachute Engineer Regiment and the 3rd Marine Parachute Regiment's Command and Logistics Company, which will provide command and support for Tactical Group 1.
For Tactical Group 1. So Tactical Group 1, I'm assuming, is the overall, what they will get there. But all these guys, the important thing to pull from this is these guys are all airborne and they're all Marines. And they're all legionaries, which means they're all light infantry, more or less, kind of. Take it with a grain of salt. They are a very well-trained troop.
The same day, a VAB company from the 2nd REMA, stationed in France on Gepard Alert, which is France's reserve of emergency response forces, is airlifted into Mali. They will form the basis of Company Team 1-3.
And these are also Marines, so again, highly trained units.
When the road convoy reaches Mali on January 14th, the company teams recover and consolidate, bringing together units that were previously in 4 different countries under unified control within 3 days.
That is fucking insane. You'd have to work out who's in charge, where everything is, and you literally have to draw an orbit up just to structure the unit. Because again, they're all coming from different places and what everyone has, and you have to do it on the fly, basically. Come up with an orbit, issue orders, and start breaking it down into organizations that actually can work.
On January 15th, parts of the new Tactical Group 1 begin offensive operations. Company Team 1-1, with its 15 VAB infantry company and 3 ERC-90s, drive some 250 kilometers east of Bamako Airport to secure the bridge dam at Markala. Once there, they take up blocking positions around the Niger River and relieve a contingent of French Special Forces in Markala, who then make their way north towards the town of Niono.
Because this is what Special Forces are used for, not actually like massive military operations, but as they are there to basically provide and secure the asset, so Bamako, until the company group arrives, the company tactical group arrives, and then they can go continue their mission.
And relieve a contingent of French Special Forces in Markala, who then make their way north towards the town of Niono. 3 days later, farther to the northeast, the town of Kona is retaken by an air-land force consisting of 400 Malian soldiers, supported by a platoon-sized element of French Special Forces.
That is a massive amount of Special Forces. A platoon size? He said a platoon-sized amount of special forces. Special forces platoons can be 12 people. This is very dependent. Platoon size, as I said, is a very flexible number. Depends on what you are doing. Platoons can be 12 people. They can be 36 people. It depends. But yeah, that's soft backing up indigenous forces, which is kind of the bread and butter.
Meanwhile, the main French force halts for 3 days, reinforcing their positions between Kona and Diaboli, while allowing logistics and command and control to be set up in the capital.
So basically, they're taking a rest and getting command and logistics all up at Marcala for the French, so they can coordinate at their next move that they're going to be making.
As regional African troops begin to arrive in the country, the French are relieved in place by Burkinabe and Togolese troops and renew their offensive.
Which is key, because all these French guys all they're doing is sitting in a defensive position. Indigenous forces are not. I'll be very frank with you. Indigenous forces, especially in Africa, cannot be used on the offense. There are some that can, special forces and guys, but general army guys, no. So, especially if you want to move very fast in a lightning war, which is what France is going to do here. But they can be relieved to hold the important positions that they already occupy with other African units.
Burkinabe and Togolese troops and renew their offensive. On their deep drive into rebel territory, Tactical Group 1 splits into 2 prongs. Infantry Company Teams 1-1 and 1-3 wing north, with their ultimate objectives being to secure the border with Mauritania and seize the town of Timbuktu. Armored Company Team 1-2, meanwhile, continues northeastward towards Gao. Together, Gao and Timbuktu account for 95% of North Mali's population.
How did you think about that? They account, those 2 cities right there, 2 towns / cities, account for 95% of the population of this region. That is insane. And as you can see, when you take the population centers, you can start coordinating if you're going to go hunt the terrorists out in the mountainside. But you need to take these cities. And Timbuktu, if you don't know, is where all the gold was for the empire back in Yi Day, an African empire. So that's where Timbuktu is.
On January 21st, the northern prong captures Diaboli, and the southern prong reaches the town of Douentza, which the Malians captured the same day. While Tactical Group 1 makes their initial gains, French High Command is making preparations to bring their forces to brigade strength. On January 21st, the highly mechanized Tactical Group 2 sets sail from France. They're carried by the Dixmude, a Mistral-class amphibious assault ship escorted by the corvette Lieutenant du Vaisseau Louis Neff. It consists of 2 mechanized infantry companies from the 92nd Infantry Regiment mounted in VBCI infantry fighting vehicles, as well as a reconnaissance squadron from the 1st REMA with a mix of VBLs and VABs armed with 20mm autocannons, a reduced artillery battery of 4 Caesar self-propelled howitzers from the 68th African Artillery Regiment, and an engineer company from the 31st Engineers.
So again, this is an asset being deployed onto an amphibious assault ship. That's what this is. And they can all fit here with all their supplies and gear. They're not exactly premier troops like the airborne and REMA guys are, but they are on alert and they're good enough to get the fucking job done. Not only that, they are bringing some serious firepower to Mali. The terrorists don't have a goddamn chance to fight these things out in the open. They cannot fight APCs like that with the heavy armament they have and will win. They will absolutely get shredded, which is why they are bringing them. This will have to come up later because, again, they're being sea-lifted there. It's going to take days for them to get there. But when this firepower gets there, it is absolutely going to trash anything that the terrorists can have.
2 days later, airborne units on Gepard alert from the 2nd Foreign Parachute Regiment and 17th Airborne Engineers are deployed to Côte d'Ivoire to stage for airborne operations. On January...
And again, these guys are elite troops for the parachutes.
25th
Parachute Regiment.
Company Team 1-2 recaptures Hambori along Route Nationale 16. The same day...
And it's important to remember that the Malians are always with them. They're fighting for their country, right? But they're also supporting the French here, which is key. Again, you can't really... It's always better to have fighting with allies that can, at least look out or hold defensive positions.
The same day, Special Forces from the 1st Marine Parachute Regiment and Air Parachute Commando No. 10 capture the Wabaria Bridge crossing the Niger River, enabling Allied troops to move on the city of Gao. At 12:50 a.m. on the 26th, Air Force commandos are inserted onto the runway of the Gao airfield via 2 Puma helicopters. They find the airport undefended, and before sunrise, 3 C-160s and 1 C-130 conduct an air landing movement.
And this is how you do special forces operations in the modern day. As they stated, the special forces were able to attack the bridge at Wilnabi Bridge and for the crossing that can be clear for the other infantry to support them. Okay, they are the premier force. That means they go in first. It doesn't mean they have superior firepower to anything that the terrorists would have. Quite the opposite, actually. If the terrorists have good positions and dug in well with APCs, it's not going to go well. But special forces, again, that's why they're highly trained, is to pull missions off like this. So they secured the bridge so that their other French forces with APCs and a lot more infantry can push across to secure Gao, and them spending special forces to land at an airport to take it before they airlift in paratroopers is ideal. Again, they're taking the airport so that the paratroopers can land and reinforce their positions.
They find the airport undefended, and before sunrise, 3 C-160s and 1 C-130 conduct an air landing movement, dropping off a company team from the 1st Parachute Chasseur Regiment who take over security of the airport.
You can probably fit, and just going off the C-130, I've been in one, obviously, I've been in them fucking multiple times. You can fit around 30 guys on there if you start fucking packing everything in there. Maybe less if you haven't bring in some heavy equipment. So yeah, a company-sized element to defend the airport is pretty good with special forces already there.
Positions in Gao are further reinforced by Armored Company Team 1-2 and a large contingent of African troops to become the new center of Serval Brigade operations. Meanwhile, the advance of the northern prong is progressing. In the lead up to the attack on Timbuktu, an infantry company consisting of 250 foreign legionnaires, supported by a parachute commando platoon from the 2nd Foreign Paratroopers, conducts a night drop north of the city.
Now, this hasn't been done. Last time I can think that this has been, last time this has been done in the United States, maybe 2003 in the invasion of Iraq, but that's really it. Dropping 250 paratroopers like this is what you do for an airborne operation to either take or get a staging position around Timbuktu. We haven't conducted operations like this in a very long time, at least for the United States, on a scale like this.
Cutting off avenues of egress. When infantry company teams 1-1 and 1-3 move in that day, they take the city with no resistance. Simultaneously off in the east, special forces take the airfield at Kidal via a helicopter assault deep in Tuareg country. The raid is carried out by a platoon-sized element of Air Force and Navy commandos.
So Air Force CPA-10 and Navy commandos of Depenfananto, I can't pronounce that. And then the air land for the plane is the 1st Rima and Naval Commandos from de Montfort.
Supported by 2 Tiger attack helicopters, a Gazelle, and 4 Puma transports. The city itself is secured by 1,800 Chadian troops who arrive to stage for later operations in the Ifoga Mountains. More paratroopers, special forces, and engineers are dropped onto Tesselat Airport in the country's extreme northeast, effectively boxing the Islamists into the Ifoga mountain region. The airport is further secured by an element of paratroopers that are air-landed in. By mid-February, the French African force begins its transition from fast-paced maneuver to a foot-mobile slog through rugged terrain and a hot climate.
I want you to think about that. All of that shit was just done by paratroopers and very light units that are able to drop very fast. That is, again, if you wanted to be in the military in the United States, special forces and light infantry units are the ones that are going to get to go first. That's just the nature of the war we fight now. The global war on terror, that's just the way it turned out. That light infantry and special forces, if you want action, that you're going to have to be in one of those units to get some.
New Tactical Group 3 arrives and relieves the original Tactical Group 1, who returned to France on February 17th. The new group includes one of TAC Group 1's VAB infantry companies from the 2nd Rima, another VAB company from the 126th Infantry Regiment, and 2 AMX-10 RC armored car squadrons, one from the 1st Rima and another from the Marine Infantry Tank Regiment. They're supported by an engineer company, 2 reduced batteries from the 11th Marine Artillery Regiment, one of which has 2 Caesar self-propelled howitzers, while the other has 4 120mm mortars.
That's actually not a lot of artillery. The Caesars is very much so. The 120mm, only having 4 of them, is actually not that much.
Further, after a long drive from the port in Senegal, Attack Group 2 arrives in the Malian capital on February 12th. With these forces in country, the next phase of the operation is to assault Ansar Dine and Al-Qaeda holdouts in the Ifoga Mountains. The mechanized Tactical Group 3 will attack from the west, while the airborne Tactical Group 4 will attack from the north. The latter, after regrouping, consists of 4 airborne infantry companies, an airborne engineer platoon, tactical air controllers, and a commando platoon.
So they have 4 infantry companies with a parachute, so basically very good guys that are going to work with special forces, and they have air controllers. So air controllers are basically guys that talk to the fucking airplanes and helicopters to coordinate ground fire, which is basically the planes and attack helicopters shooting at shit. An engineer company to, do engineering shit. Engineers are always everywhere. Engineers are always needed for everything, pretty much.
This force will be supported by several helicopters contained within the Serval Brigade's Air Mobile Group. Meanwhile, 800 Chadian troops will attack from the east. All the while, the freshly arrived Tactical Group 2 will remain in the south, taking on counterinsurgency operations against Mujao holdouts in the vicinity of Gao. The battle, under the codename Operation Panther, commences on February 18th and lasts until March 31st, resulting in a French-Chadian victory that significantly decreases the Islamists' conventional means of waging war. After the battle's conclusion, Groups 3 and 4 move south, joining Group 2 in stability operations in the Gao-Kidal region. As the French shift from high to low intensity operations, all 3 of its tactical groups are relieved on May 11th by one tactical group, GTIA Desert. Operation Serval officially came to an end on July 15th, transitioning into the counterinsurgency focused Operation Barkhane. Overall, Operation Serval showcased the flexible, expeditionary character of the French army through its ability to rapidly pull together mixed task forces and bring about impressive effects on the ground. But it was also indicative of a doctrine that was validated during colonial action during the Cold War and continues to be primarily used in post-colonial asymmetric conflicts against technologically inferior foes. The case acknowledged the shortcomings of the French army in terms of what kind of force it could support. As case in point, the whole brigade only had 6 howitzers and 4 120mm mortars as artillery support.
As the whole brigade, yeah, as I said, that's not a lot of artillery support. And yes, it makes sense, right? The French army, as I said in the beginning of this video, that the structure is going to lead to problems eventually when you have to start putting these units together. Because you're picking guys from that don't know each other and putting them together. And it can work in a highly trained force like the French army is. But again, this is more of a force used for fighting unconventional forces. This is a force, the French, this is a conventional force, used to fight unconventional forces, so terrorists and insurgents, okay? And it is pretty good at doing that. But this has been the French army's experience, because they've been fighting colonial wars really... even today, technically, if you count this as a colonial war, but I really don't. So they had the Algerian War, 60s, you have Indochina, all of that stuff.
The whole brigade only had 6 howitzers and 4 120mm mortars as artillery support. But at the same time, French units kept on the move almost constantly, with the commander of Tactical Group 3 bragging that he stayed in contact with the enemy for 6 weeks straight with no pause for maintenance, all the while clocking up to 5,000 kilometers. Broadly speaking, sustainment measures like stopping to maintain vehicles were kept at an absolute minimum in order to maintain momentum. The primary sustainment priorities were food, fuel, and water. It should be noted the entire French force was mounted on wheeled platforms, which have lower maintenance and sustainment requirements compared to tracked vehicles. Although the operation...
But they have poor performance off-road, but you're in a desert, it is probably prime country for wheeled vehicles.
Turned out to be strategically inconclusive, as North Mali is still at war. The operational victory brought about by Operation Serval is undeniable. But this was a big picture look. If you'd like to see how France organizes its infantry at the lowest tactical levels, check out this video on the newest organization and weapons of the French infantry squad.
I recommend you guys go check out that video there, but we will call this video here. So yes, French operations, again, very, very useful for small conflicts. But when you're talking about, for example, a war with Russia, it is not so good because they have been fighting small operations like this. And the U.S. is, again, the United States is actually shifting back to division strength to fight conventional wars again. But before then, for Afghanistan and Iraq, we were using brigade combat teams, which are basically very similar to this, but just upscaled. So, yeah. And again, the French army is very much improved and is not the same army that was in 1940. Let's put it that way. The French army is a very formidable army today. And they learned a lot from World War II from their reviews of what the fuck happened in the Battle of France. So, again, very mobile force that is able to take on and keep going with limited supply, just like the Germans were able to do in France in 1940. So, without further ado, we'll call the video there. So I'd like to thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please leave me a like. The original video is in the description, as I said in the beginning of the video. Go check that out. And if you want to watch the other video, I suggest you go check it out there. Otherwise, please subscribe so you're notified for any future videos I do. And tell me how you like this stuff. Otherwise, see people later.